Hello, this is another one of my videos on the Universal House of Justice and the Guardianship, which comes from a long manuscript I wrote some years ago on the House of Justice and the Baha'i world from 63 to 73. As with all of the other videos in this series, the main source is the messages from the House of Justice from 63 to 86, and if you want to read that book in detail, then you can see the original texts of the various messages. In terms of general background, there's an old article I wrote with Moojan Momen on the Baha'i faith from 1957 to 1988, which is also useful. The Universal House of Justice was first elected in 1963 and soon announced that it could find no way in which a second guardian to succeed Shaka Effendi could be appointed. Two facts remained to trouble the thinking of many Baha'is. First, Abdul Baha had referred to a line of guardians, but the line had ended abruptly after the very first incumbent. And secondly, the Universal House of Justice and the Guardianship had been envisaged as twin institutions which would function together in a complementary manner. Responding to these uncertainties, the House of Justice composed three major letters on the issues involved over the next few years. The first, which is the one we're going to look at today, on the 9th of March 1965. The second, on the 27th of May 1966. I think I made a mistake in the cards in the previous video there, but May 66 is the date. And thirdly, the 7th of December 1969. The House's first major public response to such questions was addressed to the Dutch National Assembly on the 9th of March 1965 and subsequently widely circulated. In it, the House addressed three questions: the propriety of the House's own election, the authority of the House in the absence of a guardian, and the functioning of the House in the absence of a guardian. As a general comment, the House also stated that it was good if the Baha'is asked about such questions which perplexed them. It was better to put such questions freely and openly than allow them to remain as unexpressed burdens on the hearts of devoted Baha'is. There were, of course, mysteries in the Baha'i religion, but if one understood the essential tenets of the faith and the indisputable facts of any situation, these were not such as to shake one's belief. The uncertainties which had troubled the Dutch questioners were easily dispelled once the basic principles of Baha'u'llah's revelation had been grasped. When the doubts and misgivings of the Baha'is were dispelled, then they could devote their every effort to spreading the Baha'i message. Serenely confident, the House wrote, that through the power of Baha'u'llah's covenant, all tests which might be received from an inscrutable providence would be overcome. The first question to be addressed was the election of the House of Justice itself. For some Baha'is, there evidently remains uncertainties about the election of the Universal House of Justice. If it was known that there would be no more guardians, why had the election of the House gone ahead? Had the time for the election been appropriate? Could the International Baha'i Council not have carried on as before? To these questions, the House replied that at the time of Shaka Effendi's death, no one had known that the line of guardians had definitely come to an end. It had been evident, however, that it had been impossible for Shaka Effendi to appoint a successor. Circumstances and explicit requirements of the sacred texts had prevented him from following the provisions of Abdul Baha's will. This is because Shaka Effendi had no son, and his male relatives, his brothers, his cousins, had all been declared covenant breakers. This was an obscure question not covered by any existing text, and therefore it had to be referred to the then as yet unelected House of Justice. Whatever individuals' opinions were at the time, no one, not the hands of the cause, the members of the International Baha'i Council, or any other then existing body could have made a decision upon this all-important matter. Only the House could make an authoritative pronouncement, and this in itself was an urgent reason for arranging for its early election. Following Shoghi Effendi's death, the Hands of the Cause conducted the international administration of the cause in accordance with Shoghi Effendi's appointment of them as chief stewards. They did this with the complete agreement and loyalty of both the national assemblies and the mass of the Baha'is. The Hands clearly realized that they had not been given any guarantee of divine guidance, however, and therefore concluded that their only safe course would be to follow the instructions and policies of Shoghi Effendi with undeviating firmness. The Guardian's plans, up to the end of the 10-year crusade, were explicit and detailed, but the Hands believed that after that point, further divine guidance would be essential if the faith itself was not to be endangered. This was the second pressing reason for calling for the House's election in 1963. The correctness of the state was also confirmed by references by Shoghi Effendi to future post-crusade plans being under the direction of the House of Justice. Accordingly, the Hands went ahead with their election plans. The Baha'is should realize that the manner in which the Hands had called for the election of the House of Justice did not contradict the requirements laid down in the relevant Baha'i texts. There was nothing in the writing stating that the election had to be called by the Guardian. To the contrary, Abdul-Baha himself had at one point, when there were renewed threats to his freedom and his own life was in danger, envisaged calling for the House's immediate election. This, I should say, was in 1907-1908, after the arrival in Akka of the Second Ottoman Commission of Inquiry into Abdul-Baha's activities, at which time it was widely believed that Abdul-Baha was about to be deported to Fezzan in North Africa, in the North African interior, in modern-day Libya. In these conditions of imminent danger, Abdul-Baha insisted on carrying out his normal activities, apparently unconcerned. At the same time, however, he made contingency plans in case the order of exile was carried out, instructing one of the leading Baha'is, Haji Mirza Taqi Afnan, a cousin of the Bab and the chief builder of the Ashgabat temple, to prepare to arrange for the House's election if anything should happen to him. According to Abdul-Baha, all that was required was for the Baha'is in the various countries of the world to elect their delegates, and for these in turn to elect their representatives, the equivalent of the members of the National Spiritual Assemblies, and then for these representatives to elect a body which would be the Supreme or Universal House of Justice. The process could proceed as long as conditions were favourable, and the elections of the national representatives in Iran, America, India, and the rest could proceed without disturbance. The House's establishment did not require all the nations of the world to have been converted to the Baha'i faith. The elections were to follow the European parliamentary system. Another set of questions related to the authority of the House of Justice in the absence of a living guardian. Shoghi Effendi himself had written that the Baha'i world order would be mutilated, his term, if it was divorced from the institution of the guardianship. It would also be permanently deprived of the hereditary principle, which Abdul-Baha regarded as invariably having been upheld by the law of God. Without the guardianship, the integrity of the faith would be imperiled, its stability gravely endangered, its prestige diminished, the means by which it could take a long, uninterrupted view over a series of generations lost, and the necessary guidance to define the sphere of legislative action of its elected representatives, that is, the members of the Universal House of Justice, totally withdrawn. How then would the House function without the presence of a guardian? The House's response was firstly to point out firstly to point to other passages in the corpus of Baha'i texts, which indicated firstly that Baha'u'llah had assured the Baha'is that God's revelation had been established on an unassailable and enduring foundation, such that the storms of human strife would be powerless to undermine its basis. Secondly, that both the Guardianship and the House of Justice had been appointed as institutions to consummate the potential inherited from the founders of the faith. Thirdly, that each of these twin institutions had its own distinctive powers, authority, rights, and prerogatives, and neither could or ever would infringe upon the sacred and prescribed domain of the other, or seek to curtail its specific and undoubted authority. And fourthly, whilst being the permanent head of the House of Justice, each successive guardian was never to have the right to exclusive legislation or be able to override the decision of the majority of his fellow members of the House. Again, the House noted that Abdu'l-Baha had clearly stated that anything not mentioned in the Baha'i sacred texts should be referred to the Universal House of Justice. It was under the protection, unerring guidance and care of the one true Lord, that is Baha'u'llah. He would guard it from error and protect it under the wing of his sanctity and infallibility. Whatever it decided, even by majority vote, would be the real truth. It would immediately resolve any differences of opinions between the Baha'is. Anyone who opposed it would be cast out from the faith and eventually be defeated. Again, in practice, before legislating on any matter, the members of the House carefully and exhaustively studied all of the relevant Baha'i texts, including the vast range of binding interpretations written by Sheikh Effendi. Although the House had not been invested with the Guardian's power of interpretation, it was empowered to do everything that was necessary to establish Baha'u'llah's world order. Its authority guaranteed what is here termed unity of administration, whilst unity of doctrine amongst the Baha'is was maintained by the combination of a voluminous body of holy texts and authoritative interpretations, and an absolute prohibition on any individual Baha'i claiming that their own understanding of the faith were authoritative or inspired. In this context, every true believer was obliged to combine profound faith in the unfailing efficacy of Baha'u'llah's message and covenant with the humility of recognizing that no one at the present time could claim to have understood the vastness of the Baha'i cause or to have comprehended its manifold mysteries and potentialities. An understanding of the full meaning of Abdu'l-Baha's will and of the developing world order which it had ushered in would only gradually be revealed to the Baha'is, who should trust to time and to the pronouncements of the House of Justice itself, which would resolve and clarify obscure matters. In passing, the House also noted that there was a profound difference between the interpretations of Sheikh Effendi as guardian and the elucidations of the Universal House of Justice. Sheikh Effendi had revealed what scriptural passages actually meant. Each of his interpretations was a statement of truth, which could not be varied. By contrast, the House's pronouncements on matters which were not revealed in the Baha'i texts were subject to later emendation or abrogated by the House itself. They were supplementary applications of divine law. Responding to queries about the House's manner of functioning in the absence of a guardian, the House noted that many aspects of this would be dealt with in its own future constitution, the formulation of which was one of the major goals of the 9-year plan, which I've discussed in a previous video. In the meantime, the House informed the Baha'is that it had the right to expel any of its own members by a majority vote if it found them guilty of committing a sin injurious to the common weal. In the case that a House member was accused of breaking the Baha'i covenant, the matter would be investigated by the Hands of the Cause residing in Haifa, and if necessary, they would expel him from the faith, subject to the approval of the House communicating the Hands' decision to the Baha'i world. So many thanks to you for listening, and particular thanks to my patrons for their kind support and encouragement. Without them, I wouldn't be able to make these videos. My apologies for what sounded like the particularly loud traffic noises which I had this afternoon. If you want, you're very welcome to support my channel. Please do like, comment and share the videos. Subscribe if you want to be notified of future videos. I'll give a Patreon link below in case you want to provide a practical support. Next week, we'll talk about the Universal House of Justice, the Guardianship, Part 3. Have a good day.